Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth, the show where we speak plainly, we ask the hard questions, and most importantly, we get real answers. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. I could not be more excited about today's guest. We're joined by a woman at the very heart of the action in Washington, Congresswoman, Chairwoman Lisa McClain, the chair of the House Republican Conference and the fourth most powerful member of the House of Representatives. But titles aside, what makes this conversation so important is where she's positioned and what she's fighting for. Congresswoman McClain, or Chairwoman McClain, sits on the House Education and Workforce Committee, which is front and center in the battleground against the surge of anti-Semitism on America's college campuses. She's also from Michigan, one of the most important battleground states in the country, a state that just flipped red in the last election. She has a front row seat to the shifting political winds in America and her insights on what's happening on the ground and what voters are really thinking. She's at the epicenter of the most urgent and important issues we're facing now: anti-Semitism, education, political realignment, and the future of leadership in America. We are honored to have her with us today. Please join me in welcoming to Nothing But the Truth, Chairwoman Lisa McClain.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are so happy to have you. And first of all, tell us about conference chair. Sure. What is that? What does that role mean?
Yeah, it's a leadership position in which I'm elected by my peers to serve as the conference chair. And what that role really is entitled is the messaging for the entire Republican conference. So I work hand in glove with President Trump and the administration to make sure that his message and our Republican message in the House that we're on the same sheet of music, so to speak. I also do a tremendous amount of member services as it pertains to information that is specific and tailored to their district to help my members bring the stories to life with the policies and the legislation that we're passing here in Congress.
So you were elected by the Republican members of the House.
Yes.
That is really remarkable. This is only your third term in Congress, right?
Yeah, it's an honor to serve. It's fun. I enjoy it. And I love to amplify the message.
So as chairwoman, does that change your day-to-day? I'm sure it does. I'm seeing that smile. So I'm sure it does. So how does it change the day-to-day?
You know, it went from just representing me in the 9th district to really representing the entire conference. So when we message, when we speak, I'm speaking for the entire conference. So I meet with members on a daily basis to help them message and articulate the message specifically to their district. And we do have a very diverse conference right now. You know, we have people that are in ruby red seats to people who are in seats that Biden won, actually. So you got to tailor the message specifically to their district. I also run the conference. So every fly-in morning, we have a conference meeting. It's my responsibility to run those meetings, to make sure that we run the press conferences and that I elevate all the members of our conference, whether it's women, whether it's African American, whether it's Arab Americans, really to get the members' voices elevated and heard.
So that's really very interesting because we've had Whip Tom Emmer on the show previously, and he explained the role of a whip. So it is very interesting for our listeners to hear the different roles that people play. So you're completely different than what Whip Emmer does. And it is very, very, very interesting. So best of luck to you in that role. And I'm sure that you will do that very, very amazingly. Moving to the next topic I'd like to cover, which is that you sit on the House Committee on Education and Workforce, which has been it has catapulted to such an important level in terms of what's going on the anti-Semitism on college campuses. So this particular week, we've seen President Trump uh, speak about pulling $9 billion in aid from Harvard because of their anti-Semitic policies. That is the executive branch. So that doesn't really, that isn't, you know, what you are really covering in education and workforce. But do you work in lockstep? And how do you see that the role of the education and workforce continuing in these days now?
Well, I think if you look at the Education and Workforce Committee, it was our very committee that brought in these college presidents that led to their demise, quite frankly, because they couldn't even answer basic, simple questions. And we really brought the problem of anti-Semitism front and center. And we began to see action with these college presidents getting fired, which is a little bit too late. But we also work hand in glove with the president. So yes, the president is doing executive orders to eliminate funding if they don't comply. We need, as Congress, we need to make sure we codify those executive orders and make them into legislation, because at the end of the day, we do have the power of the purse. So President Trump has opened the door. Now we need to codify those decisions, cut off the funding for these colleges and universities that aren't following the law and aren't safe and believe in this craziness. We need to make sure that that continues, that it's not just a once and done, and we have every intention to do that.
So just to clarify, to make it simple for those of us who aren't in Congress, the president issues an executive order, and that executive order applies to just Harvard with $9 billion. And the Congress can codify that into something that can apply to many colleges. Is that?
Yes, in essence, real simply put, is we want to make sure that this is permanent legislation. So when we go and appropriate funds for these universities, if they're not complying, we do have the power of the purse. We need to use that power of the purse and cut off, not just for Harvard, but for any college that isn't following the rules. So that's the ability that we have to make this permanent.
So how are you moving forward with regard to, let's say, Columbia University, which is really a hotbed of anti-Semitism and a horrific place to be for a Jewish student at this point?
Yeah, why anyone would even send their children to the University of Columbia or these anti-Semitic schools that refuse to deal with the problem is beyond me. But here we have it. We have several pieces of legislation that we're working on right now to make sure that we don't fund these universities. I know we have 60 schools that we're investigating. I know that we're going to have more presidents of these universities in. So we're also not letting it die. There was one very intelligent woman gave me some really good advice, and she said, Lisa, be careful, because what people will do is on the short term, they will let this die, and it will stay dormant and will be quiet. And then all of a sudden, at some later date, this anti-Semitism will rear its ugly head again. So we must make sure that we put procedures in place, and what the procedures that we have is the funding mechanism to make sure that we aren't enabling this type of behavior. And that's what we're working on right now, is really the funding mechanisms and the protocols to get federal funding for your universities that, quite frankly, these universities are dependent on.
So it seems like, it not seems like, but it is not just an anti-Semitic issue. Obviously, foreign governments are investing in these universities. They are embedded in, they've been so for decades. The rot is so deep And it's really not anti-Semitism, although that is how it came out and came to the surface. It's really anti-American, anti-democratic values. And it's very frightening to see that, um, that in the future, uh, the people who will be in government, the leaders, are being indoctrinated at these schools by real, real anti-American
If
professors.
if we want to make long-lasting change, we have to get at the youth, right? And I would even say it goes even into the grade schools, the middle schools, and the high schools. You see it, at its loudest form, I would say, at the college universities. But we have to root this out in the in the minds of our young children. And we also have to look at these tenure professors. Those are part of the problem as well. And until these universities start dealing with these anti-Semitic tenure professors, that's the other problem that we really have to get to the heart of. That is a big, big issue. And the way we do that, we think, is putting laws into place. But we also, funny how you see Columbia University fold or Harvard University fold when we begin to turn that money spigot off.
Yes, isn't that remarkable?
Yeah. Sad, but true.
Very sad. Um, Really troubling what is going on the college campuses, and I'm very happy to hear about what's going on in your committee, and that you are at the forefront of making sure that these things can be correctable and will be corrected.
We have to, and the time to correct them is now.
Yes, now when we've actually seen what has happened, what is going on there. I want to ask you about the SAVE Act now. So tell us about that, and why is it important?
This is really simple, common sense legislation. I mean, simple. Basically, what it says is we want only American citizens to vote in our American elections. Pretty simple, right? Seems like common sense. And we want to make sure that we can validate that you are an American citizen, not just say, hey, I'm an American citizen, trust me. You will have to show identification. Wow, that's a stretch, right? Like when you go, when somebody goes to the liquor store, for example, to buy a 6-pack of beer, they don't just take their word for it and say, hey, I know you look like you're 18. You really don't look like you're 21, but are you? Okay, you tell me. Okay, we don't need to see any ID. You have to have ID when you purchase liquor,
Well,
alcohol.
I can tell you that yes,
You have to have ID when you rent a car.
yes, I've been asked for ID at the liquor store, and I can assure you, I do not look underage.
Oh, yes, you do. But my point is that is really so out of bounds and so unethical and immoral and un-American that we're asking people to validate that you're an American citizen to vote in our election, where we know 10 million undocumented illegal immigrants under the Biden administration are currently in our country. That's really
Why is that controversial? Why is this?
exactly. Why is it controversial? I have to show an ID to rent a car. But to do one of the most sacred things, which is the right to vote, you're just going to take my word for it? What are you hiding? What are you afraid of?
So is this legislation, like, was this introduced this week?
We're voting, we're scheduled to vote on it this week. Why anyone would vote against it, I don't know. What the Democrats will say is, well, it's already in law, so we don't really have to vote on it. Well, if that's the case and it's working so well, then you shouldn't have a problem voting on it, number one. Number two, it also puts in enforcement mechanisms. Because if it was working so well, a Chinese student who is not an American actually voted in our Michigan elections. So clearly we need to do better.
Are the Democrats actually opposed to this? What do you see? I mean,
Oh, goodness gracious, they are opposed to it. Absolutely. I mean, that is idea discrimination. I don't know what crazy thing that they're going to come up with, right? Yeah, they're opposed to it. They
that just
want these illegals to vote. They have to control the election, Judy, or they can't win because they can't win on their policies. Half of the Democrats like what's going on at these college campuses. Of course they want more illegals to vote because they want to control the elections. They do not want fair elections. They want to rig the game. That's why we must fight very hard against them. There's no common sense. They've lost every ounce of common sense they have.
so do you see this as a controversial issue? Forget about the members of the Congress that are Democratic, but across America, people, I mean, I would think it's just the most basic thing in the world. We're a citizen of this country. We want to
I
be able
think
to
I
vote,
think
only citizens.
polling has showed that the majority of Americans want fair elections and they only want Americans to vote in the elections. So this is a popular issue. This is a winning issue. This is what the American people want, and this is what we're giving them.
Do you, I'm sure you've polled the House on this vote. Do you see this as passing bipartisan?
Well, remember, we can say it's going to pass bipartisan if we just get one Democrat to vote.
Right.
I hope it passes bipartisan. We'll see. We will see. I'm not optimistic that we'll get the majority of the, 2/3 of the majority, excuse me. We'll probably get a few Democrats to vote for it. But I think we'll have to tune in and see.
So do you think it will pass ultimately?
It will pass. Absolutely, it'll pass. Yes.
So in our next election, midterm elections, you think that we will need to have an ID in order to vote?
Yes. Yes. And we are pushing and fighting very hard for that.
Let's,
Seems like a no-brainer. Can you even believe it? Like, listen to what we're talking about. I mean, isn't it crazy that we're even talking about this? Like, you have
yes.
to have an ID to vote. Wow. You have to have proof of citizenship. Wow.
It seems like the argument on the other side is counter to the American people. So it doesn't make sense to me how they could actually verbalize that.
It is. You are 100% correct. It is counter. And they prefer to put illegals and non-American citizens in front of American tax-paying citizens. Unbelievable to me, but that's what we're dealing with.
That is really, really horrific. I know we have to wrap up soon, so I just want to ask you one last question. You represent Michigan.
Yeah.
That is a battleground state. It went very red in the last election.
Yes.
What do you see as a prediction going forward? Midterms usually go against what happened with presidential.
I think it'll all be with it'll all come down to voter turnout, right? If we can be organized and turn out the vote, we will win. We have a governor election coming up as well as a senatorial election, as well as the congressional elections. It's going to be all about voter turnout. There is no question that our policies, the Republican policies, common sense policies are ruling the day. But you look at the tactics, the fear mongering, just the flat out lies that the Democrats are doing right now. We can't rest on our laurels. We have got to continue to fight. We've got to continue to message and continue to point out the lies and the fear mongering of the left that they're doing. And all they want to do is talk about the personality. They don't want to talk about the policy, if you notice, because if they talk about the policies, they lose. So that is my job and our job. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that we continue to message and get everyone out to vote as well. And I feel very confident that we will do very well in the midterms.
I sadly have to say that we're coming to the end of our time together. Chairwoman Lisa McClain, thank you so much for
Thank
joining.
you.
Your
Have a good day.
leadership, oh my goodness, your leadership at such a pivotal time is deeply appreciated, and we hope you'll come back again as these critical issues continue to develop. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern. You can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. on the radio. And if you missed any part of this show or want to listen to any of our episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.